to my mind that you are you are expected to get one question, uh, which you can note down the probable question. Uh, discuss the importance and role of English. Discuss the importance and role of English in modern India. Okay. Should I repeat it again? The question which you are supposed to get from this section uh, is discuss the importance and role of English in modern India. You are expected to get a question, and there are other areas in the blog, but as the time is limited in our hands, we can concentrate our discussion on the importance and role of English in modern India today. Okay. uh, so to start, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
are you able to hear me
Yes.
clearly?
Yes, sir.
You are all able to hear
Not,
me
sir. Sir,
clearly?
your voice is not. Excuse me, sir. Good morning, sir. Sir, your voice is not audible.
Hello. I tell me what.
Sir, your voice is Sir, your voice is breaking.
Uh, what I could not get you. What? Ajay, please repeat it again.
Sir, she is saying that there is some technical problem.
Uh-huh.
So your
Technical
voice is
problem
breaking. Yes, sir.
in audibility.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Speech is not clear.
Hello. Excuse me, sir. Hello.
Hello,
Sir,
hello.
I will sir, I will rejoin. Then I'll see. Okay.
No, am I clear now?
Yes, sir.
No, are you able to hear clearly or not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, is it clear now? No, is there any problem?
No,
No, sir,
clear,
it is
sir.
clear.
She might have some problems, sir.
Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh. No. In case any problem, you uh, if you find any technical problem, please convey it immediately so that we can rectify if there, at all there is any technical error. So, what are we going to discuss today, friends? What are we going to discuss today? As I told you, we are going to discuss the importance and discuss. I actually as I told you, you may get a probable question on this area, and the question is discuss the importance and role of English in modern India. Okay. Hello.
Yes,
Yes,
sir. Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Uh, could you note the question?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Thank you.
Yes. So, friends, the parameters of Indian culture, parameters of Indian culture and languages determine the extent of changes and adaptation in English language. Uh, in other words, so English uh, is a second language for us, isn't it? English is a second language for us. So, uh, depending upon the Indian culture, depending upon the varieties of languages, whether it is Oriental, whether it is vernacular, whether it is ethnic, so languages speaking also varies from region to region. Speaking also varies from boundaries to boundaries. So that is why the parameters, the actually measuring thing of Indian culture and languages determine the extent of changes and adaptation in English language. It should be remembered that Indian English is a it's such a term, Indian English such a term that it does not in any sense imply that all Indians uses of the English languages have equal proficiency. So we speak English, but many experts, they are of the opinion that Indian English is a cover term and does not in any sense imply that all Indian users of English language have equal proficiency. Meaning thereby, uh, our actually speaking proficiency, our actually proficiency in understanding, proficiency in speaking English varies from person to person. It varies from person to person. And that is why many experts, they have given their opinion that Indian English is a cover term and does not in any sense imply that all Indian users of the English language have equal proficiency. We don't have equal proficiency. It varies, our proficiency actually varies from person to person. Proficiency means what? To articulate correctly, to articulate fluently is otherwise uh, uh, known as proficiency. So, English, we are all, English is a second language for us, and therefore, our proficiency varies, it differs in understanding, it differs in speaking from person to person. And the variations, the differences in Indian English arise basically due to three reasons. Our variations in Indian English arise basically due to three reasons: uh, regional, ethnic, and proficiency levels. So, our variations in Indian English arise basically due to how many regions? How many regions?
Three.
Three regions:
Three regions. What are they? Regional,
regional, ethnic,
ethnic, and
proficiency.
proficiency level. Proficiency level. So regional. So we are bound by. Hello. We are bound by regional boundaries. We are actually we are bound by regional boundaries. We are bound by actually our culture. We are bound by our traditions. Hmm. So naturally, speaking a language differs from region to region, and so regional, ethnic, and proficiency levels. So ethnic, as you all know, ethnic means bound by our culture, bound by our tradition, uh, and according to our culture, according to our traditions, speaking also depends on it. Speaking English also depends on it. And third one is proficiency level. So as many experts, they have observed in their analysis, they have observed in their study that proficiency also differs from person to person, region to region. Uh, the ethnic varieties, as you all know, mm, uh, are not same in India. It is cut across regional boundaries. Our culture is not same. If you go, if you move from one place to other, you find a different culture. If you shift from one state to other, you find different tradition. You find different culture, and that is why it is rightly said that the ethnic varieties cut across are cut across regional boundaries. So it differs from one region to other. It differs from region to region, uh, and therefore our culture is therefore it is rightly said that our ethnic varieties are cut across, and it is bound by regional boundaries, regional limitations, regional areas, and uh, we are bound by our own culture, we are bound by our own tradition, and depending on our culture, depending on our tradition, the language also is also adapted accordingly. In this way the language is also adapted. In this way the language is also adapted depending upon the culture, depending upon the traditions. And the issue of variation in proficiency, variation means difference in proficiency. As we discussed, proficiency differs, proficiency varies, proficiency actually is not same. It differs from person to person, region to region, culture to culture. And proficiency is specifically important in India, where English is mostly learned as a second language. We all admit the fact. As a learner of English, we all admit the fact that issue of variation in proficiency is specifically important in India, where English is mostly learned as a second language. English is learned as a second language. So, therefore, uh, it is very important to actually it is very important on our part to see the multilingual aspect of English, and therefore uh, the English language, uh, actually it is the introduction of English language. We will study the introduction of English language into the country. We will study the introduction of English language into the country, the circumstances and motives around it, its position in pre-independent era and post-independence India, its role in the educational setup of the country, the problems associated with English learning and teaching in India, particularly in relations to the Indian languages, and finally, the future prospects of English in India. So, while we are going to have discussion on importance and role of English in modern India, it is very pertinent, it is very essential on the part of a student to study the introduction of English language into the country. While studying the introduction of English language into the country, we will have to take into the circumstances, the motives surrounding it, its position in pre and post independence period, its role in the educational setup of the country, the problems associated with English learning and teaching in India, and the prospect of uh, English in India. The space of English in post-independent India cannot be delinked, cannot be differentiated from this phenomenon. Any understanding of the status and role of English in present day, any understanding of the status and role of English in present day multilingual India has to necessarily take into account the circumstances under which studies were introduced in India, and therefore any discussion on the space of English in present day, any discussion on the space of English in present day multilingual India is bound to be very complex one, because Indians among themselves do not agree, or as to whether or not English is a foreign language. Many Indians feel that despite use of this language, despite the use of English in India for over 5 centuries, English has not become an intrinsic part of Indian social fabric. So, many experts they give their opinion that we are not ready to accept the fact that it is an intrinsic part of Indian social fabric. Yet, some people continue to feel inferior for their lack of proficiency in English, and they are defensive, they are embarrassed about their vernacular or mother tongue education. So, many people they admit the fact that this language uh, it has not become an intrinsic part of the Indian social fabric, but as the importance of English grows time to time, many people they feel inferior, they feel embarrassed about their vernacular and mother tongue education. But again, there are some who feel the indispensable need for English in the country. So, so far as English is concerned, uh, it has occupied a prime role. It has occupied an important role in present day context, and therefore many people they feel that it is indispensable, and there is need for English in the country. Uh, the uh, English, the place of English in colonial India was different. Means when India was under British rule, the place of English was also different at that time. The European languages arrived in India. When did it arrive? It arrived with the discovery of the sea route to the subcontinent by Vasco da Gama. We all know it that European languages arrived in India with the coming of Vasco da Gama in the year 1498. In the year 1498, European languages arrived in India with the discovery of the sea route to the subcontinent, and the influx the it began with the Portuguese and the French, who later surrendered political power to British. And through the 15th and 16th century, we are discussing the actually language English in colonial India, and through the 15th and 16th century, the British quietly devoted themselves to the gathering of information about India, and once that was done, they arrived in India with full vengeance and drove out all European competitions very soon. But the British were qualitatively different from the Portuguese is that while the latter language became a lingua franca, English became a lingua franca, a language uh, to actually communicate, a language, a tool of communication, a medium of communication. Lingua franca, English as a lingua franca means a medium of communication, a tool of communication, essential a tool for communication. And therefore, wherever the Portuguese set up shops, English never actually interacted with the Indian languages in the same way, did not go through the process of colonization, and decolonization remained more or less an elite phenomenon. So it was confined to elite, it was confined to a particular group. The teaching of English in India dates back therefore dates back to the early 19th century and was initially associated with the energetic spirit of the missionaries. The missionaries, they actually, at that time, the energetic spirit of the missionaries means they missionaries, they felt energetic, they felt encouraged, they developed a spirit to propagate the language, to spread the speaking of language in India. The East India Company uh, entered the picture when the Charter Act of 1813 made the company responsible for the education of the Indians. When the in Charter Act of 1813 that made East India Company responsible for the education of the Indians, uh, it was at this stage that the issue of the medium of education took a pivotal role, took center stage. And these early attempts at English language teaching in India were overshadowed by political compulsions. And the efforts of the pro-English lobby culminated in Macaulay's Minutes of 1853. Macaulay's uh, Minutes of 1835 advocating English education in India reflects this limited perception of the rulers and their imperial design. Therefore, despite protest from vernacularists, despite vehement oppose from the vernacularists and the Orientalists, Lord Bentinck accepted this proposal of Macaulay and directed all funds to be employed in imparting to the native population knowledge of English literature and science in English language. Which period? During the period of Lord Bentinck. So Macaulay, uh, the Charter Act 1813 and Macaulay's Minutes 1853, advocating English education in India reflects this limited perception of the rulers. And although there was vehement protest, there was protest among the vernacularists, among the Orientalists, Lord Bentinck was bent upon. Lord Bentinck was adamant. Lord Bentinck accepted their proposal without any exception and diverted all funds to be employed in imparting the native population uh, knowledge, native population knowledge of English, literature, and science. And uh, so, a kind of three language formula, a kind of three language formula uh, uh, came into the existence. English became the most popular medium of instruction, but existing facilities for Oriental and vernacular education also continued. So, Oriental vernacular, our own language, Oriental uh, uh, own language, our own language, own language also, medium of instruction was also given in our own language, in our Oriental, in our vernacular language. And English also continued as a medium of instruction, but obviously they did not enjoy the same status as English. The vernacular and Oriental medium did not actually accept, but obviously they did not enjoy the same status as English, while Persian continued in lower courts. In the Persian continued in the lower courts. In the higher courts, English uh, actually continued. Language thus became a marker of social differentiation naturally. Obviously, when some people will be speaking English, and they will be giving prime importance to that language. And in other parts of the country, Oriental and vernacular would be dominant, would be used as medium of instruction. So there was a differentiation. Language thus became a marker of social differentiation. So, and the British rulers very consciously, knowingly tried to promote English to a position of prestige. The British rulers, they formed the opinion that English as a medium of instruction, English as a language is a question of prestige. It is a position of prestige, and they consciously try to promote English. This actually led to sharp divisions. This led to sharp division in the population between the English educated elite, English educated group, and the vernacular educated and the illiterate group, illiterate masses. So there was a obviously this will lead to a division, and division uh, between the English educated group, English educated elite, and vernacular educated and illiterate masses. The elite, by virtue of their closer links with the rulers, became absolutely alienated from the masses, and therefore, when there was actually protest, when there was vehement opposition to accept English as a medium of instruction, as a language, by some groups, uh, the elite group took advantage of it. The elite group took advantage of it, and therefore the elite, by virtue of their closer links with the rulers, the Britishers, they became absolutely alienated from the masses. And uh, a another expert, Rajeshwari Sundar Rajan, pointed out that consolidation of English language in India coincided with the consolidation of colonial power in India. So, colonial power, they coincided with colonial power. Learners were introduced to a literary canon comprising Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Dryden, Pope, Wordsworth, Keats, and so many other actually writers, poets of that time. They were learners were introduced to a literary canon. So, elite group. So it was the actually uh, this led to sharp division in the population between English educated elite, and knowingly the elite group, they were inclined to study major works of the writers, major works of the poets of that time, and the colonial also power, they introduced a literary canon uh, comprising Chaucer, Shakespeare's, the masterpieces of Chaucer, Shakespeare's, Milton, Dryden, Pope, Wordsworth, Keats. They introduced major writings, and they also the elite group were also inclined to study it, and the likes that were presented as the finest in literature. So, a shelf of these books was said to be the worth of all literatures the, of the Orient. So, the net result of this brainwashing was that, irrespective of whether Indian had knowledge of their vernacular literature or not, every educated Indian swore by this canon, a fallacy which continued till very recently. To take care of its elite nature, a series of reforms were introduced. A series of reforms were introduced. And the Nagpur session of the Congress in 1920 suggested that children should be withdrawn from English medium schools. and be admitted to a national school. Nagpur session of the Congress in the year 1920 suggested it was a very radical step. It was a very radical step, and it clearly suggested the protest against the imposition of English and acceptance of English by the elite group. Therefore, Nagpur session, as we all know, the elite group is gradually feel alienated from the rest of the masses, and therefore Nagpur session, the Congress in 1920 suggested that children should be withdrawn from English medium schools and be admitted to national schools. Within a very short span of time, within a very short period, several national institutions, namely the Gujarat, Bihar, Kashi, Maharashtra Vidyapit, Kwame Vidyapit of Lahore, and the National Muslim University of Aligarh were established with the clearly defined agenda, with a clear cut agenda of controlling Indian education and fostering, developing a sense of love and respect for the Indian languages and culture. Uh, See, in Nagpur session, participants in the Nagpur session of the Congress in 1920 uh, became very radical in its agenda, suggested that children should be withdrawn from English medium schools, they should be admitted to national schools, and with a very short period of time, many institutions, many national institutions, national schools were opened, namely namely the Gujarat, Bihar, Kashi, and Maharashtra Vidyapithas, the Kwame Vidyapith of Lahore, and National Muslim University of Aligarh were established within a very short period of time, within a very short span of time, and with a clearly defined agenda, with a clear cut agenda of controlling Indian education and developing a sense of love and respect for Indian languages, Indian culture. And through the 19th and 20th century, several language associations developed. Several language associations developed during the period 19th and 20th century. Uh, Many national, I mean, many during this period, many actually several language associations developed. Brahma Samaj in 1820, Arya Samaj in 1875, and uh, Satyasodak Samaj in 1873, all of whom knew that they could far greater numbers of people through the Indian languages. So through these institutions, through these associations, uh, Indian languages were promoted, and throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, voices continued for Indian languages and vernacular education, mostly notably, uh, I mean, Gokhale, a famous bill for compulsory primary education, 1910-12. Gokhale's famous bill for compulsory primary education. So the situation was such at that time that many actually radical thinkers of that time, they advocated for they advocated for establishing associations, establishing different institutions, and also bringing certain bills like bill for compulsory primary education. And the Zakir Hussain committee report in 1938, it all prepared under the influence of Gandhiji. It were all prepared under the influence of Gandhiji, and they all insisted that mother tongue draws out the best in each child. Very important. It is very important to know that all insisted that mother tongue draws out the best in each child and should be made the basic tenet, basic principle of all education philosophy. So, this was a period. Despite these efforts, English continued to gain importance. See, in spite of such radical movement, in spite of such actually attitude, radical attitude in their mind, the great thinkers like Gokhale, the great thinkers like Gandhiji advocated for actually the mother tongue. They insisted that mother tongue should be the basic tenet, should be the basic principles of all education philosophy. Despite these efforts, English continued to gain importance in pre-independent India, and English medium schools and colleges continued to multiply and flourish. See how the parallel parallel growth of English speaking schools, English speaking colleges. Despite these efforts, English continued to gain importance, and in pre-independent India, while the radical thinkers are in favor of mother tongue, during this period, during this independent period, English medium school and colleges also continued to multiply, also continued to grow in number, and also flourished. English became an important weapon of the freedom struggle. English became an important weapon of the freedom struggle. The Indian leaders used the language of the colonizers against them and became a medium of sharing, collecting and spreading information in different parts of the country. And as uh, many experts they say that it added another voice to the Indian multilingual repertoire, stock of work. So they also the Indian thinkers they are preparing for they are preparing ground for establishing uh, I mean many institutions, establishing schools and colleges where mother tongue as a medium of instruction could be promoted, and in the and similarly against this background, despite their efforts, uh, in pre-independent India, in pre-independent period, English medium schools and colleges also continued to grow, continued to flourish, and English became an important weapon of the freedom struggle. And the Indian leaders also used the language of the colonizers against them and became a medium of sharing, collecting, and spreading information in different parts of the country with the help of English. So it added another voice to Indian multilingual work, though a voice that did not rise from its grassroots, not perhaps a voice that could ever reach the grassroots. They knew it, that it is spoken, it is used by a limited group, by elite, and therefore English in India in the uh, uh, post-independent period, uh, it has passed through the same stages of development, and it has also received controversy as in the pre-independent stage. English in India in the post period, post 1947 period, has passed through the same stages of development and controversy as in the pre-independence stage. When India became free in 1947, the immediate uh, task before the leaders of the country was to find national language. When India became free in 47, the immediate task before the leaders of the country was to find a national language and lingua franca, a language that could be a tool for communication, that could be a medium for communication, and which would serve as a symbol of national unity and integration. English as a language could also become a symbol of national unity and integration. According to the first census of Free India, 1951, there was 845 dialects and 50 major regional languages belonging to different language families. None of these languages could claim superiority to the others, and no consensus could be reached for some time. The battle came down to two languages, Hindi and English. Hindi was seen as a threat by South Indians, those who had fought for India's independence, however, felt the presence of colonial rule in the retention of the spread of English, and it was obvious that a compromise needed to be evolved. A compromise needed to be drawn. Finally, in 1953, in 1950, the Constitution of India stipulated that Hindi in the Devanagari script would be the official language of the Union of India, and laid down a time frame of 15 years to effect the change over from English to Hindi. It was expected that by 1965, Hindi would become the language of mass communication and replace English in most of its domains. All this has been discussed earlier by the experts, by the by the language experts. So, as a brief mention, by 1959, it became obvious that proposed changeover from English to Hindi was not going to happen. To their surprise, 1959, it became obvious. So, they also they drew a time frame of 15 years to effect the change over from English to Hindi, but it could not be possible. In 1959, it became obvious that proposed changeover from English to Hindi was not going to happen. In 1959, when Nehru was Prime Minister, in a speech in Lok Sabha assured the non-Hindi speaking people that English would continue as long as they wanted it. As long as they wanted it. So, situation came to that level. So, there was a controversy in their opinion, controversy in their policy. So, although a time frame was given, it was not possible to achieve goal, and therefore, Prime Minister Nehru, in a speech in the Lok Sabha, assured that particularly for the South, the non-Hindi speaking people, that English would continue as long as they wanted it. But Nehru, after Nehru's death, they rekindled the apprehensions of the non-Hindi speaking population, leading to agitations and violence. Finally, in the year 1967, the official language settled the issue by making English an associate language of the Union of India without any time limit. So, this happened, this is the development. And in the year 1956, the Academy of Tamil Nadu Culture objected to the imposition of Hindi. Academy of Tamil Nadu Culture, Tamil culture, objected to the imposition of Hindi as the official language. On the ground, on what ground? On the grounds that it is an unfamiliar language to the population of about 100 million. In the year 1956, Academy of Tamil Culture strongly opposed the imposition of Hindi as the official language on this ground, on the ground that it is an unfamiliar language. An unfamiliar language to a population of about 100 million. Again, in 1958, the All India Language Conference demanded what? What did they demand? They demanded the continuance of English as the union language. The continuance of English as the union language. They demanded that English as a language should be continued without any time limit. Without any time limit. Similar anti-Hindi agitations continued through the 1960s, while the anti-Hindi groups pressed for the retention of Hindi. They demanded that this language should continue, and pro-Hindi groups agitated for the introduction of highly Sanskritized Hindi, which made the language an alien one for even the native speakers of the language. So, this is how the controversies continued, but there was a wide protest from different non-Hindi actually speaking region demanding English as a language to continue in India. So the question is, do we need English in India, and especially in educational sector? It becomes a question. Do we need English in India, and especially in the educational sector? This is a question that bubbles in the mind of many experts. And some experts argue that English has no place in rural India. Many people says that English has no place in rural India, and that poor people can hardly afford English education. Place of English, Indian educational setup, this was the place. So some people, some experts, they give their opinion. They feel that though English may serve as a link, though English may be used as a tool of communication, as a medium of communication, they feel that English may serve as a link language, and the language of opportunities. Local or regional languages should be preferred. They actually, some experts, they encourage that local languages should be preferred. Local languages should be preferred. But such views are a minority opinion. And most Indians regard English as an Indian language and a necessary part of everyone's development. So, they feel that English had made positive contributions to our freedom struggle. English also occupies a neutral position. Therefore, making it more acceptable to the southern states, making it more acceptable by the elite, making it more actually as an acceptable medium by major section of people all across the country. English should be continued as a language without any exception. It is also supposed to be the language that will open a new world, a world of knowledge and opportunities, power, and it was the common consensus that English is here to stay. English as a language cannot be stopped, cannot be, uh, uh, can, we cannot keep English away from us. And therefore, Professor Amitabh Basu puts it, I quote, English is the language of the new global world. Wherever you go, you can manage with English. And there is no point in washing away or uh, actually keeping it away, as the importance of English is growing faster and faster.
Excuse me,
Spread
sir.
of democracy and expansion of educational opportunities have led to a phenomenal increase in the number of students. Schools and colleges and education is no longer the exclusive privilege of the upper classes.
Excuse me, sir.
Hello?
So someone is making over the disturbance over there. By unmuting his mic.
Yes, there is echo, na?
Now some person
I,
named Muktikanta Dupal.
I
He has not
also
muted his
hear
mic yet.
echo. So it is disturbing. No, it is stopped now, I think. Yes, stop. Who is he? Who is he?
Muktikanta, sir.
Uh,
To Dupal.
yes. The position of English is a complex one, made even more complicated by the very conditions under which Indian learners learn the language. English is not really foreign language, more like a second language. It is, yet it is not really a second language in the sense in which it is used in the English speaking countries. So English language teaching in India is different from the teaching of English to immigrants, UK, US, and other English speaking countries. Moreover, the exercise of non-native variety of English, namely Indian English, complicates matter, and one has to be realistic. One has to be realistic when planning the future of English in India. Uh, uh, the planners, the policymakers, they have also they should have proper planning. But one must aim at neither the native nor the non-native variety, but a compromise between the two. And the aim should be to equip the learners to make this language familiar with the learners with an ability to switch from the local variety to the standard variety. One actually, this should be the realistic goal rather than the idealistic goal or native like, because the communicative competence is important. Communicative competence is important whether in case of education, whether in case of commerce, whether in case of information technology, in all spheres of life. The communicative competence actually occupies a prime role. Therefore, the language should be continued. This is the learners need to have to be made primary, and one way of doing it is to introduction of English specific purposes. It entails the provision of English language teaching to meet the learner's particular needs. It related to the particular occupation of area of study, selective language content, but they have varying levels of language competence, having been exposed to English for any from irrespective of gender, irrespective of mother tongue, irrespective of regional languages. So our target and focus of English at the present time. The target of ELT planners in India, English language teaching planners in India should be inculcating fluency and accuracy among the learners. Students should be provided enough opportunity for conversation. They should be provided opportunities for discussions in formal and informal situation so as to maximize the benefit from their limited knowledge of the language. Focus should uh, be not only on received pronunciation (RP), intonation and stress. Focus, very important. So focus should not only be on received pronunciation, intonation, or stress. The aim should be not to teach rules and grammar, but to enable the learners to convert and use the rules that they already know. Accuracy should be the parameter. Accuracy teaching should be limited to the school levels, and after that, learners should be made aware of the common errors that Indian speakers of English make. Integration of fluency and accuracy in English teaching will be more beneficial than the present focus only on accuracy. Okay, thanking you all. It is time, huh? Time is over, friends. It is a vast area, as I had told you. I was not able to focus. I mean, focus my actually teaching on all points. Therefore, I could. I became very much selective in my discussion. Participants, are you able to hear me? Are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
It was not possible. It is a vast area. Uh, Therefore, it was not possible to give attention to certain actually areas. Uh, Therefore, actually concentrated our discussion on a specific area, and I think this area I actually went through all units, but to my mind it comes that you are supposed to get a question on the area which I selected, that it would be beneficial for you, and you can have some knowledge on the role and importance of English in modern India. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.